Common knowledge can be a bit of a slippery thing to define. Whether something is common knowledge to one person is very different than whether it's common knowledge to another person. It all depends on your level of knowledge or expertise in a particular area. If you're a musician, the difference between a half note and a quarter note is probably common knowledge. But for someone who knows nothing about music, it's far from that. There are a lot of areas in our life in which having a little common knowledge can be really beneficial. Things like nutrition and mental health and relationships. And having a little bit of information about these topics can really make us better off. And of course, money and personal finance is another area where having a certain amount of common knowledge is really helpful. But in the area of personal finance, defining what common knowledge is very, very difficult because everybody's level of knowledge is very different. How do we know what the most important things are to learn about personal finance, especially when there's so much information available online and through books and other areas that it's kind of overwhelming? When I think about healthy eating, for an example, I have common knowledge about what makes for a healthy diet. That includes things like eat a variety of fruits and vegetables, avoid bad fats, don't eat too much sugar, avoid too much caffeine and alcohol, and choose those complex carbohydrates rather than simple carbohydrates. And if you're a nutritionist, you would be able to fill in the gaps and add a whole lot more information. But am I going to do pretty well with just those 5 bits of common knowledge? Yeah, that's going to get me a long way to eating healthy. It's the same with personal finance. You don't have to know everything. And I think there are sort of 5 basic topics of personal finance that everyone should know a little bit about and have some common knowledge about. And here they are. Number 1 is to understand debt, and especially credit cards, because understanding how much you're paying on debt, and especially on your credit cards, is really important. And also understanding how they charge you interest is really important, so that way you can avoid wasting a ton of money on interest expense. Number 2 is understanding what cash flow is and understanding your own personal cash flow. It's simply how much is coming in and how much is going out. And if you can lay that out nicely and have a good grasp, then you're going to know what you can afford and what you can't afford. Number 3 is understanding how to manage your bills properly. So this is really making sure you pay your bills on time, and it may involve automating your bill payments to make sure they do get paid on time. And this is going to protect your credit rating. Number 4 is learning how to save and invest early. Even if it's a small amount, the earlier you get started, the more time you have to grow your earnings and compound your earnings, because time is really your friend when it comes to saving and investing. It's also important to always have a financial cushion in your savings. And lastly is mindful spending. Being fully aware of what you're spending money on is going to help you avoid wasting money on frivolous items, things that don't add value to your life in a meaningful way. And it's very easy to spend without being mindful. And if you can learn this early to be very aware of where your money is going, you're going to avoid wasting a ton of money on things that just don't matter to you. As I said, there's so much information available about personal finance and money. And so if you're just starting out, you can start with this list and focus on these 5 areas. And no matter what your knowledge level, I'll tell you this, avoid wading into those more complex areas. Things like financial maneuvers and speculative investments and trading strategies. Those things are only going to add confusion and complexity in your mind. And if there's too much complexity, it's going to end in paralysis, which means you end up doing nothing. So really try to avoid making it too complicated and really just keep it simple. When it comes to money, a little bit of common knowledge really does go a long way. You can read more in my recent Clarity blog post called Common Knowledge on www.clarityonyourmoney.com.